This is The Open Podcast, where your host, Sander Mangel, and his guests share strategies and insights to help digital agencies thrive in a changing world. In this episode, Sander talks with Rens Gerritsen, founder of TreePlus.
We are talking to Rens Gerritsen. He's the founder of TreePlus and a coach for online building of in-house development teams. He's been 15 years in IT, of which 8 years in building product development teams. Today, we're going to talk about his journey, the different models that he has tried, how he builds teams, and all the hurdles that he has taken in order to get to a point where he can now build his own team in Kosovo. Rens, we've known each other for quite a few years, probably from either Meet Magento or Webwinkel Vakdagen, the world-famous Dutch e-commerce conference that no one can pronounce. Who doesn't know it? But I think where we actually got to know each other very well was back in the days when you were with Buckaroo as part of their product development team. And we actually had the chance of building a team for Buckaroo. I wasn't that much involved. I think I just did a little bit of oversight on the code quality, but you actually took the lead there. Is that more or less where you got started with building development teams?
Yeah, I think so. Indeed, I think we know each other from back. Well, I think it was around 2020, around that time when we first met, and I think we started collaborating somewhere 2022 actually. Indeed, where you connected us to a partner of yours and start building our own nearshore development team back then in Romania, where you indeed, and don't take it too lightly, I think you were quite heavily involved, especially in the beginning around refactoring of our Magento 2 module. And for me, indeed, that was the first time as well, also building hands-on experience with nearshore developer.
Yeah, that was... I guess the experience was good because you kept doing it. You transitioned to building one in-house though, in Kosovo. I would love to hear how that kind of evolved, going from hiring developers from a software house, as we would like to call it, to building something yourself.
Yeah, where should I start actually? So from building that experience with a nearshore team in Romania, a lot as a company, as Buckaroo, especially during COVID time, the company grew quite massively. And we needed to rapidly scale our development back then. We did that mostly through our teams in Romania, which was fine. It was easy to get to new resources, but we also constantly felt the struggle of really building that connection with those people. Although that we did invest some time in flying over to Romania, meet the team, catch up, do some team building, it was still quite difficult to actually build a good team synergy. And one of the things I still think is very important I think in every field, but also in software development, product development, is actually building a good team synergy, a good team. I think that brings you further in the end. And with that knowledge, with the growth that we had back then, we at some point made a decision to transit to a different way of working and start something our own.
Yeah, I love that you called it out, right? Because anyone can write code now, especially in this day and age. But it's about culture. It's about a shared culture. It's about commonalities in how do we perceive ourselves, the product that we're building, what is the definition of the quality that we want to deliver. But I guess also a lot of domain-specific knowledge, right? And in that case, it was payments, which I think is a relatively complex domain even. But even if you're selling, I don't know, fasteners or screws or whatever, there's always a certain specific domain knowledge that a developer needs to know in order to build functionality that really fits the business, right?
Yeah, correct. You say it right, especially in payments, which is complex. Not that any other business is not complex in its own way, but it is complex. It takes time to learn. It's a lot of different systems talking to each other. So we need people on board for the long term. And then working with an external company was sometimes just challenging, in all fairness, which then on top of everything gave us more reasons to start looking for something ourselves. And in our case, that was building a hub ourselves in a foreign country, which was a journey as well, I can say.
Right. Because all of a sudden you go from being a payments company to, and of course you were into some extent, but to being a tech company, a product company, a company that writes code for a living, for e-commerce platforms. Was that a transition? where you weren't just a customer that said, I want this feature to, oh shoot, oh, I actually need to start thinking of how I approach this?
I think the biggest transition in the end is the whole decision of building a office in a foreign country, where you have to, apart from building the company there, dealing with regulations, taxes, etc. Obviously, also you're investing money in finding the right people to work for you, with you, training those, but also coming back to that topic again, learning their culture, their way of working, but also implementing your way of working there. Like in the end, Buckaroo was already a software development company, a SaaS, but due to rapid growth, having an in-house team in the Netherlands of, I think back then it was about 20, 25 people, and then scaling that up to 100 plus people within a quite short time frame is just challenging, especially if the majority of that growth is in another country where you're not day-to-day there. So that makes that more challenging. Fun though, but challenging.
Right. Yeah, I imagine. And I can also imagine that most listeners here will not start to build their own company in offshore from day one.
No.
But there are tangible benefits to having your own developers that have no other priorities, more or less than right, working for you, working on your backlog. I think now in the age of AI, we see that code also becomes something that companies want to own again because it's easier to write. So building that development discipline is something that is becoming, if I may say so, a bit more mainstream.
I think so. Yeah, and I think we're well, I'm not even sure if we're right in the middle of it yet, looking at the hockey stick model. Not sure where we are right now. For sure, within software development, within product development, we are early adapters. But let's also be honest, everything that you learn last week is old now, since there's something new, a new model, new technology. And I think that the biggest thing right now is not so much the new development of AI itself. It's more on how we as people are adapting to it and are actually gonna embrace it and make it work with us, not for us, with us. I think that's the biggest challenge, and that will for sure make a shift in a lot of spaces, and especially software development. I've seen numbers where they say that we can do it with 90% less people. I'm not sure if that's going to be the fact, but it's going to for sure impact, and it's going to for sure make a shift into a more productive way of working. But it's also going to result in a lot of new challenges that we haven't had before, I guess. Finding the right setup, where indeed you previously might have needed a team of 5 with a backender, frontender, QA, a designer, etc. You might not need that anymore at this stage. But what do you need? And then again, if you're going to replace those resources for AI, who is then going to validate things that you're actually building? A lot of questions popping in my mind when talking about this.
Absolutely. But I think no matter if you have one developer or a team of 5, 20, or 100, as you mentioned, I think there are some universal truths there, right? Some universal challenges that you need to address. And I think we've spoken about these a couple of times. First of all, how do you integrate them into your company? How do you make sure that they are really a part of your team, right? Because most companies will not be software development companies. They might be a manufacturing company. They might be a reseller on Amazon or Bol.com or what have you. So I think there is a challenge. Another one is how do you become a good product owner, right? Not just chucking something over the wall, opening the basement door and throwing in some requirements, but actually starting to work with your team to you tell me in a minute. And I think the last one that I've seen a lot of companies struggle with is if you treat your developers, right? I'm a company, I hire 3 developers and I treat them as unicorns that do not need to communicate with people and that I keep in a locked room. Is that autonomy actually going to benefit me, or is that in the long run going to deteriorate the relationship between developers and the company? I'd love to dive in all those 3 topics for you. Maybe we can start a little bit with the integrating of the team with the wider company. And I think this goes for either onshore hiring people, nearshore or offshore, right? How do you create that common culture? How do you foster those relationships between the different departments, the management and the developers? How did you approach that at Buckaroo, maybe at the moment at Treplus?
Yeah, but I think the answer is quite straightforward, but also still difficult. It's just like attention, right? If you work with people, in what form they want to get attention. They want to be treated as one of yours, whether that's like working with a freelancer. I think it's the same, whether it's you're indeed nearshoring, offshoring, working with an agency, and you want to create a space, I think, where everyone feels welcome and comfortable. And especially then talking from a nearshore perspective, as we did with Bookru previously, or I did at Bookru previously, and now I'm building myself with Thread Plus, is get over there, talk to your people, meet your people, get them over here, involve them in your day-to-day business. But also smaller things like at Bookru, when we switched to an offshore office, all the communication internally was still in Dutch, since Bookru was a Dutch company, 140 people talking Dutch. So what we did from day one is switching all the, at least company communication in-house to English. Small gesture, but big difference for the people working, in our case, in Kosovo. They felt way more involved in that way. But also talking about more like the contracts, etc. Keep things in the same beneficial way. Obviously, in the Balkan region or whatever foreign country, when you talk about contracts and secondary benefits, things are way different there than here. We have it quite good over here. Also there you can mingle a bit, you can mix and match a bit to make it more equally available. In the end, with that, I guess you're creating a stable setup, and then combine that with investing time in their culture. Who are they? Where are they coming from? Talk to them. They are fun too. It's nice to drink a beer with them too. They have humor too. They're not robots, right? So I think that all together, those ingredients make a nice cocktail, I guess.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is treat them as human beings, show honest interest, and open that dialogue. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I had the idea that you can indeed just throw things over the fence and expect something beautiful to come back from it. Not sure where that idea comes from. It's not who I am, not how I want to work, at least. And I've been in all those directions. Let's be honest. I've also been working in other countries.
Exactly.
I have quite some experience with different kind of setups. Tried it all, failed, stood up, and tried again. And in the end, I think, treat people how you want to be treated is the simplest way going forward, I guess.
Yeah.
And also in that, with that in regard, it just creates small ambassadors. It creates a lot of ownership, and people who are feeling that they have ownership are, in my experience, just way more motivated and way more eager.
So you're saying treat people as human beings, show honest interest, and it'll pay off in the end.
Sounds logic, but yeah.
I loved it. And I think it's a good point, right? You already mentioned that you cannot just expect to throw something over the wall and expect to get great results back. Especially not at the start, right? When they don't know the company, when they might not know the culture, when they do not have that tribal knowledge yet, that they get after years and years and years of working together. And that goes the same with a team that is in your office as with any team, right? You need to explain stuff, especially if it's business with developers. There is a bit of time to invest in, okay, this is how we work. This is how we run, invoicing in this company. Right. So if you create an order in the, e-commerce platform, it needs to adhere to these rules or what have you. Right. There's a lot of shared knowledge that you have to build up, right? Which I would argue is also the value that you create when you have an in-house team, right? Versus an agency where you say, figure it out. Here you can start to say, okay, let's sit together. Let's start to create that IP that is actually going to bring value to the company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In all fairness, not sure if I have much to add to it, actually.
No, but I think that's a frequently misunderstood point of having internal developers, that development is not just writing code, because at the end of the day, again, everyone can write code. Today, AI can write code, but to write code that actually satisfies business needs, that takes into account all the edge cases, that understands how people think in a company, that part is actually the technical and the architecture maybe. where value is created.
Yeah, touche. Like I always told people when they join the company, like learning the company will take you 6 to 9 codes. You can write codes, but learning the company, like how we operate, how we are, culture, etc. But also indeed our business, our market that we're operating in, that takes time. And for that, indeed, working with in-house developers where they are, whether that's in the Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, Romania, Ukraine, I don't care. Having in-house people in the end works there, I think, more beneficial than working with an agency, freelancer, debatable though. But yeah, I agree.
Let's maybe dive into those three, let's call them flavors of working together with developers, right? Because we've talked about having an in-house team. There's agencies, there's freelancers, nearshore and outsourcing. I think you have tried them basically all.
Yeah.
Any insights that you can share there? What worked, what didn't, when to leverage what kind of a resource, right? Because I also don't think there's a silver bullet.
No, there's not. And indeed worked with the majority. I think when I started at Book Group back then, we were working with several agencies, especially in the field that I was responsible of around our third-party integrations. So for Magento and Shopware, we there worked with an agency. Like, of course, benefit of an agency is that you're hiring experts in that field, direct experts in that field. So from sort of day one, they at least can build what you're expecting to build. The downside, again, as we already touched upon, is that they just lack real knowledge on your market, your company, etc. It's often just way more expensive and less flexible. When shit hits the fan, you want to call someone and just want to have it fixed and not rely on an SLA, which is never ideal for you.
Please create a ticket. We'll get back to you within a week.
Been there, done that. Yeah, correct. Yeah, so same counts for freelancers. Not too much hands-on experience. We did work with some freelancers back then, but those were mostly old Bookroom employees. So that there, yeah, I think they knew the company culture, so not much of a problem. More cost-wise, obviously, it's not the best way to move forward, especially not if you want to grow fast and just getting more capacity, I guess. And then indeed, nearshore outsourcing is where, for me at least, most of my experience is at. Worked in several regions within Europe, all with their own pros and cons. Every culture is different. Every country, the work ethics are a bit different, obviously. And important there is just, again, like how can you blend those two cultures a bit together and move towards a more stable way of working. And the benefit there, obviously, is that they are fully integrated within your team, within your company, into your way of working. Downside might be that it takes a bit longer to get them up and running because they need time to get to learn your market, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But long run, you will get obviously the most out of it, in my experience.
And is there a model in which you go hybrid, meaning I have 1 or 2 people on my side, but I see a need for some flexibility, being able to get experts in that I might not want to have permanently on staff? Would you recommend that?
I have no direct experience with it, so I'm not sure if I can advise properly here. I think there is a way that could work, obviously, but that could also work in a near offshore setup, in all honesty, since most nearshore companies that you might work with, you have your own developers, your own teams there. And if you need extra hands on a specific field, they might also be able to just deliver that for shorter periods. Working in a hybrid way could work, but in the end, it all depends then on the actual way of working. Does the agency or the freelancer also gonna work in your own Jira instances, in your repos, according to your standards, etc., etc. If you can find a way of working there, sure.
So I think that's a very good point you raise, right? Because if we're going to fare on the assumption that basically we're slowly moving to a point where every company becomes a software company, it kind of feels like that at some point, right? You do want to own what you build.
100%.
So you're saying make sure you do have your own Jira setup. Make sure you, right? And Jira is the project management tool which we use to record the requirements. We use Git to store that code. We might have hosting. Even if you use SaaS, there's always something that you have to host somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is invest in actually owning that so that even if someone moves away, you change an agency, you go from agency to in-house, you own all of that.
Yeah, I think we can talk about this topic for hours. I think you have some experience on this too. And my fair share, I still see this going wrong too often. And especially with companies that are like not hardcore software development companies. They should do software in some way. And indeed, nowadays, almost every company is a software company. They often forget about that. Indeed, where is the IP rights? Where am I hosting my things? Who is writing the coding standards, etc.? All those basic things, take those things in-house, keep that close with you to keep that flexibility in every setup, if you ask me. That doesn't depend on if you're working with freelancers or a nearshore agency. That counts for everything.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And maybe beyond that, right? If you have your own developers, or not even developers, right? It's developers, it's QA that you might want to have. It might be a project manager or product owner that you want to have on that side. You can also start to build your own practices around that, right? How do we do delivery? How do we do testing? That kind of stuff. So that if you onboard a new developer or QA engineer, whoever, you actually have something to give them, and you don't have to start from.
Correct.
Yeah, I love that. I think under the assumption that software seems to become something that is just so much a commodity, right? I think we went from the age of on-prem, right? The old IBMs and what have you. Salesforce then launched the more or less a SaaS idea where you rent something. I think they were one of the first ones. I think we see that much more with Shopify now, where you don't own your store, you just rent it. What I'm seeing in the market is now all of a sudden it only takes an hour or so to build small applications. I'm not saying we're going to build a whole Shopify from scratch, but it becomes much more of a thing to just write your own code because it's so much easier and so much cheaper. So it also makes sense to kind of invest in being able to own that and operate that, right?
Yep. And I think in the end, it will save you a lot of problems in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe, and we already touched upon this a little bit throughout the conversation, but let's, to wrap it up, talk a little bit about the hurdles that you have faced yourself, and maybe have seen with clients when they build when they build their own team. We already touched upon intellectual property rights, of course, but also documentation and access, the technology choices that you do. What are some of the pro tips that you can share?
Well, I think you named the majority of them indeed. Still things that you see mostly going wrong is indeed intellectual property, I guess, especially if companies that do something with software are not, as said, a hardcore software development company, tend to move to a offshore setup, which is, time zone challenges. There you just see that there's not properly thought of how to deal with IP rights. But in the end, I also had that same issue with working with agencies. And so not saying that's purely an offshore issue. Well, let's not talk too much about documentation, since in all fairness, I think that was up till AI became really a thing. I think the biggest challenge always, but let's be honest, nowadays, if you're not writing documentation right now, or let AI write documentation for you, you're really doing something wrong, and you need to start reconsidering a lot of things, since that's just way simpler nowadays. Way simpler.
Yeah.
And obviously what comes out of it is not always perfect, but it saves you like 95 to 98% of your time. Let AI write your documentation. And again, like indeed choosing the right technology, you named it. I recently had a case indeed where someone hired an offshore company to build a product based on an idea he had. Conclusion was it was built within time, it was built within budget, but now what was built, he didn't really know. He needed someone to audit it and validate whether the code was actually good and scalable and for his needs. Answer, no. So in that whole process, don't look too much at numbers, don't look too much at what does it cost. Look at what you need, what you not need right now, but what you need in 3 to 5 years. Build something based on that. Let you properly be advised on that. Like, especially if you don't have any experience in that field, hey, get in contact with a consultant that can help you out on that field, or just work with a company closer to home. There are plenty. good ones.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that's a good point, right? Again, very easy to write a lot of code, whether it is the right code or not. That is always the question, especially if you're going to start integrating it with your ERP system or a fulfillment company or what have you. It's so hard to really thoroughly test that. Like, how robust is that solution? Will it catch edge cases? Will it break the moment I enter the wrong country in an address or something like that? That is something that is just very hard to test.
Yeah, and this is again also, I think, the field where AI still lacks for the majority of companies doing something with AI. You cannot let AI replace that yet with making those decisions, I guess. So pay close attention to it, invest some extra money to properly do that, I would say, since in the end, those decisions are going to make or break you in the end.
Yeah, I like that. So what I'm hearing is invest in infrastructure, right? And with infrastructure, I mean having the process, having some tooling, having a way to capture requirements for all I care, develop some core capabilities as a team in order to be able to develop software. But in that case, you do actually own what you need. You own the IP, you own the idea, you have something that actually fits your needs instead of getting something bloated. And last, find a model that works for you best, but it's worth exploring having your own in-house resources or in-house. Yeah, the resource that work dedicated for you.
Yeah, I agree. Since in the end, that brings you on the long run, it brings you way more in my own experience, more stability, more quality, more ownership, and also more fun in the end. Since you're just building a connection with people that you work with on a daily basis. That's also worth something. Let's be honest, a personal relationship nowadays. So yeah, for me that was still in all the models that I've worked with over the past 10 years, 15 years that I've been in IT, that was still the most suitable setup for me. Pros and cons everywhere and for every company. The answer is obviously different.
Yeah, I love it. Rens, thank you very much for sharing your journey with us, sharing your experience that you've gained over the last decade and something. A lot of food for thought. Where can people find you online? LinkedIn?
People can find me on a lot of places.
Ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, most likely. No, I would say indeed, just search my name on LinkedIn and you will most likely find me and my company.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you too for the invitation, Sander. Bye.